Someone in channel sent and linked to an article, and Rich reminded me sort of that we do need to, I get these series going, and it's just easier for me to focus upon those things. But we'll try to get to some phone calls today. So hold on, I'll let you know when we're getting close to that, and we'll go from there. But someone sent me in channel a link to an article by David Barash, professor of psychology emeritus at the University of Washington. Okay, so you got a psych prof at University of Washington, which is so far to the left that if they didn't have it chained to where it is, it would just simply almost fly to North Korea and China, because it's pretty much infested with communists. Okay, so we're talking as leftist as you can possibly get, and this article is, it's time to make human-chimp hybrids. It's time to make human-chimp hybrids. And the reason is pretty straightforward. It's expressed here. Looking favorably on the prospect of a humanzee or chimp human will likely be not only controversial, but to many people downright immoral. But I propose that generating humanzees or chimp humans would be not only ethical, but profoundly so, even if there were no prospects of enhancing human welfare. Why? Why do something like this? Why completely violate any normal standard of morality or anything? Well, how could even the most determinedly homocentric, animal-denigrating religious fundamentalists maintain that God created us in his image, and that we and we alone harbor a spark of the divine distinct from all other life forms, once confronted with living beings that are indisputably intermediate between human and non-human? That's his reason. That's his reason. His hatred, consuming hatred of God as our creator. In any event, the nonsensical insistence that human beings are uniquely created in God's image and endowed with a soul, whereas other living things are mere brutes, has not only permitted but encouraged an attitude toward the natural world in general and other animals in particular that has been at best indifferent and more often downright antagonistic, jingoistic, and in many cases intolerably cruel. It is only because of this self-serving myth that some people have been able to justify keeping other animals in such hideous conditions as factory farms, in which they are literally unable to turn around, not to mention prevented from experiencing anything approaching a fulfilling life. It is only because of this self-serving myth that some people accord the embryos of Homo sapiens a special place as persons in waiting, magically endowed with a notable humanity that entitles them to special legal and moral consideration unavailable to our non-human kin. It is only because of this self-serving myth that many people have been able to deny the screamingly evident evolutionary connectedness between ourselves and other life forms. When claims are made about the right to life, invariably the referent is human life, a rigid distinction only possible because of the presumption that human life is somehow uniquely distinct from other forms of life, even though everything we know of biology, lie, demonstrates that this is simply untrue. What better, clear, and more ambiguous way to demonstrate this than by creating viable organisms that are neither human nor animal, but certifiably intermediate? His whole purpose, the whole reason, is to demonstrate that we are not created in God's image. Now, the depth of madness, in this professor emeritus is fully consistent with what we read in Romans chapter 1. It's fully consistent with what we read in Romans chapter 1. it is something that we have only started seeing over the past 30, 40, 50 years in Western culture because of, I would suggest, the withdrawing of God's hand of restraint upon the innate insanity of man that results from his rejection of his own nature as the creature of God, and specifically the creature of God that bears the image of God. You need to understand this type of thinking was what was behind the gas chambers. This is what's behind the mass sterilization of populations. I mean, any type, the worst types of dystopian movies and novels you could ever think of. These people, David Barash, these people have been given over as image bearers, but given over to this kind of absolutely destructive, self-destructive way of thought. And the sad thing is, this article is based upon a chapter that will be in a book that will be published this summer by Oxford University Press. This is where the intelligentsia of Western culture are going. And the only possible outcome of the continued pandering to this kind of insanity, evil insanity. This is evil insanity. Let's call it what it is. This is not just insane. This is not just some crackpot psychology professor. This is evil. Absolutely morally reprehensible and evil. The only outcome, if there is not a major fundamental change in the spiritual perspective of Western culture, is the fundamental destruction of that culture. Because this is self-destructive thought. This is the end of civilization as we know it, being expressed by these kinds of individuals.